Hello and welcome to the Metavistic Television, and I'm CJ Carl, and today I'm here with Zarin, who is the author of the book Atlantis, A Karmic Memory of the Rise and Fall. Now this book is full of a lot of detail about the fabled lost continent of Atlantis, from its first settlement through its destruction, a 3,000-year history, and details about the people involved, the forces involved in the entire history and what happened, how it happened, answering questions that we have to this day about who were they, what did they do, what happened to them. These questions are all answered in this book, and I wanted Zarin to give us a little insight in how this all came about. Zarin, thank you for being here today. We're very pleased to have you.
Thank you, CJ. About 2 years ago, I started to get images of Atlantis. I wasn't quite sure what they meant. I was getting a lot of information about crystals and huge, mile-wide crystal shafts that sank all the way deep into the earth. And I thought, I wonder if that had anything to do with the reason why Atlantis fell. And then I started to get details about people and scenes of the city, the capital city of Atlantis, and the overall design of the continent and how it came into existence. And in the book I've tried to relate that in a much more detailed way so people can understand. This is a memory. This is not just a fascination or imagination. The details are too great for it just to have come into my head. And so I've started to collate this, and when I finally met CJ and started writing for his magazine, he asked me to do a synopsis, and I did, and he liked it. So we collaborated on creating this book, which is so big and so large it has to be done in 4 parts.
Now there's a lot of information in it. The whole thing about Atlantis, when Zarin first brought this to me, I found it extremely fascinating because we all have our concepts of what Atlantis was. There are millions and millions of us who know inside we feel that Atlantis was real. There's other people that will get very hostile about the fact that they don't believe it ever happened. But that's beside the point. That's their path. This is ours. But in the book, there's a lot of details about what happened, the people involved. And one thing that I found really fascinating is that it brings it down. You get to know the people and certain personalities and the history of this, just like you would of the Roman Empire or of any other thing that we're familiar with the history. It talks in detail. So again, now you started out getting these feelings, the dreams.
It came in great floods, the dreams did. I'd wake up in the middle of the night and I'd have so much information. I had to get over to my computer and get it down so it wouldn't get completely distorted.
So when we've talked before, you have the dreams, but you also get during the day, all of a sudden, it's just like something opened up and a lot of information started pouring in.
Exactly. It's where it comes from. No one really knows for sure, but I think there's a place in outside of the space-time matrix that all information is kept, and no matter how weird or how strange it is, it's there. And some people somehow have the ability to access it, and I'm probably one of those people. And the reason why I got so interested in Atlantis, I had never read Plato, and I had never read his recollections, which were in the Timaeus and Critias. So I bought a book of it, and I read it, and I was interested in his description of Atlantis. And that the fact that he went and mentioned something called orichalcum. You don't go into this kind of detail in describing a civilization if you're doing a fantasy play about morality. And there were so many things stated about this that would be historical. Plato didn't do this kind of thing. He was raised in a logical discipline. So I thought, if I'm getting these images of Atlantis, and Plato had this discrete and distinct description, there must have been a place like this. Whether it was actually called Atlantis or not, we'll never really know. But he called it Atlantis. I remember it as Atlantis. I definitely remember the name of the capital, which was Atalan. Now, whether there's a similarity or synchronism between the name, I don't know. But that was the name of the capital. And there were many details that encompassed the description of the actual continent that were never in any book, never written about by anyone. And I thought, well, why would this detail be there if there wasn't something to it? And because we're having so many earth changes right now and so many things that are happening that are unpredictable and scaring people, I thought maybe this is the time that information should be reborn.
So we've got the book. Now, as you said, the Book of Atlantis is being done in 4 installments.
Yes.
Book 1 is currently out. It's called Paradise. It's about the first approximately 1,000 years of
Yes, it is.
history.
It's when Atlantis was first settled, occupied, explored, population was built up. They established the capital city of Atlantis. There were 3 rings. There was a peninsula that struck out into one of the 3 rings, a central ring, and they built their port there because it was protected by the sea. It was protected by the rings, and it was a very logical place because it could also be protected by the rings themselves. And they did this because they were primarily a fishing people, and they wanted to take advantage of the harvest of the sea. And they had an unusual ally in Atlantis with this harvesting, which you can read about in the book, or you can ask me a question about it if you wish.
Well, it's interesting that because this ally of theirs that we can talk about, we'll mention here a little bit, is one of the basis for the 4th book.
It is primarily the basis for the 4th book, if you want to know the truth. It's the dolphins, and we all have secret love for the dolphins. Many people don't even know why they love the dolphins so much. Because I've always suspected, this wasn't before I started getting the recollection on Atlantis, I always suspected that the dolphins, the cetaceans as they're referred to, were more intelligent than we were. They were more advanced than we were, and because they don't have technology, and we do, we think we're better than they are. That's a very false assumption. Technology is not the end-all. It is just a means of dealing with nature. The dolphins could do something we cannot do. We try. We don't do it very well, do we? And that is astral project. They could do it as a collective. And when they understood how to do it, they were able to go anywhere in the universe instantaneously, and they were able to discover information instantaneously. There is a progression of how they did that and what they came across, but that is in the 4th
Right.
as well.
One thing about the dolphins, the dolphins were a very close ally to the early Atlanteans, because the early Atlanteans were a very peaceful and very stable society. They got along very well with the dolphins because they didn't have their warlike instincts. They got along well. They had a sense of humor, which the dolphins did. And I know for a lot of people, and talking to different people, when you start talking about the dolphins being this intelligent and everything, a lot of people start backing out going, yeah, right. But when you stop and think about it, we know that even today the dolphins are extremely intelligent, but because we have trouble, we can't communicate with them, we haven't learned how to really communicate and learn to understand who they are. So it's interesting, plus the fact that certain things about Atlantis made the dolphins of that period more capable of doing some of that than they would be now.
Very capable.
It's,
the biggest problem I've had over the years when I've been studying history is how they always assume that these great cities and these great structures were built by aliens or somebody else, Europeans that got lost. And it never dawned on them that the people that actually lived there built them. So you have to, we have an arrogance about ourselves. We think that we are smarter than anyone else, that we're smarter than the Chinese, or we're smarter than the Indonesians, or we're smarter than the Native Americans. Nobody's any smarter than anyone else. It's what the end of your results, not the results themselves. It's what you lead to. And Atlantis started out as a paradise. It was the place that we all hunger for in our hearts. The place where it was peaceful, food was plentiful, shelter. Everything was what we say we want out of life. And the people had created a paradise. But unfortunately, they forgot one of the rules of nature, is that everything changes, and that's what happened to Atlantis.
and the fact that it did change, that's one thing it's talked about in the book. The book will lay out who they were, what they did, what were some of the forces that came in, what were the things that caused the change, where did that take them, how did it change their relationship to the world, and become the whole worldwide history of Atlantis. And it's all in the books, between the 4 books. The first book, like I said, is the first 1,000 years, called Paradise, and that is out now. The second one has to do with exploration, when they actually built their fleets and they created their 5 colonies, their additional colonies, found all these other places, including Mu.
They came in contact with Mu, the other advanced civilization on the other side of the world.
Right, and going through all that area. And then the third book is actually the destruction. What happened when they met other seagoing forces that were very powerful.
Very powerful.
And but what caused the destruction, who caused the destruction, and what was the effect of the destruction on the rest of the world. And that's all in Book 3.
Well, let's take a simple metaphor. The United States of America started out as a country believing in freedom, in which a man could do whatever he needed to do to get as far as he could. But eventually the country changed, and it continued to change. The Industrial Revolution, money, greed, barons, robber barons, all these things started happening to us, and we lost sight of the real truth of why we were here. We were here to be free, and now we're giving that up for greed, and that is exactly what happened in Atlantis.
The interesting thing about Atlantis is that it is a blueprint for what has happened in cyclical periods since then. And if we knew and understood what happened then, maybe we could see things going on today in a slightly different light and be able to interact with them differently. I believe that this whole information of what you've done with Atlantis is a very, very powerful book. It's very informative, and it's powerful because it shows the Atlanteans as real people, not fantastical creatures of myth and this that had no relationship to anybody else on the planet. It was real people, the good, the bad, the ugly. It was all there, and it's laid out so we understand these people through this book. We actually understand the Atlanteans as real people that really existed, and we can see the logical progression of where they went, what happened, and how it happened from a perspective 10,000 years later. We're talking about a civilization that was 3,000 years. The Roman history, the entire empire of the Roman, was only able to survive for 1,000 years. This is 3,000 years, 3 times the length of that. And yet, you think about the fact that today, 2,000 years later, we still have a lot of impact on our society, on our thinking, on our architecture, and things like this that came from Rome. So is it so hard to believe that after 3,000-year history of something like the Atlantean culture that permeated the entire planet, literally, through what they had, with work they had going on, that it, for thousands of years after that, it affected people, the architecture, how they did things, and that bled into the. In fact, they were there before Egyptians were Egyptians, when they were still when they were called Nileans.
That's right.
Before they became Egyptians, and so they were part of teaching the whole thing from the beginning.
There was a 4,000-year gap between the time Atlantis sank into the ocean and the first the pyramids were built. That's a long time.
Mm-hmm. That's a great deal of time. So when you do this whole thing, there is so much information, and this is one of the things that sold me on working with the book, is there's so much detail, and it reads like the story of a real place. If you have any kind of interest in Atlantis, you can't afford not to check into this book, because when it comes to, and I know there's a lot of people who say, if it comes through channeling, well, yeah, right. But,
hey, a lot of the great scientific inventions came through channeling. Einstein's theory of relativity came through channeling. Every great idea in science and in man's knowledge has come through channeling. What do you want to call it is imagination, channeling, whatever it is, it's something out there that provides us with information that we don't automatically have.
So the whole thing is, it's extremely interesting. I think that you may want to check into the book. It's available at bookofatlantis.com, and we'll have it on the screen directly after this interview. Again, that's bookofatlantis.com. It's called Atlantis, A Karmic Memory of the Rise and Fall. Check it out. Zarin, thank you for being here.
Thank you, CJ.
And we'll see you later.